Hello, everyone. I'm Jim Garrison. I want to welcome you to this session of Humanity Rising in the spirit of the trees, as I usually do, but in a very specific way. Last Thursday, I took a retreat for a few days to come to the vicinity of Yosemite National Park. And on the day that I came, on the 7th of July, a fire broke out called the Washburn Fire that was on the eastern side of Yosemite and grew very quickly. It's now consumed over 2,000 acres and has approached the Mariposa Grove in Yosemite, in southern Yosemite, where 500 ancient sequoias, the mother trees of the sequoias, are protected. And the greatest and the oldest of the mother trees is called the Grizzly Giant, stands about 209 feet, has stood for over 3,000 years. And it's been an extraordinary experience, on the one hand, coming to nature to commune with nature, and being acutely aware that because of the human degradation of the environment and human encroachment on nature, we have now set in motion in the state of California annual forest fires that start earlier and earlier every year and burn later and later. So just holding this contradiction between we humans wanting to be in nature for the solace and nurture of nature, and at the same time, not too far away, knowing that we're burning nature. The mother trees are threatened. And there have been stories of heroic stories of these firefighters, doing everything they can to protect these mother trees. So you also have this juxtaposition of human exploitation with human passion to protect that which is so important to all of us. So it's within the context of this contradiction and deep synergy between humanity and nature that I want to greet you, and out of which Humanity Rising has been broadcasting for over 2.5 years now, so that humanity can rise in the full realization that we are nature. Me speaking to you right now is nature speaking. You listening, you feeling what you're feeling about the sequoias is nature feeling. We are nature consciously articulating in intelligible conversation aspects of reality that we all share. So for the last several days, I've been sitting in meditation, just feeling the water in my body and offering it to the mother trees. And it's been one of the most powerful experiences that I've had in a very long time, to feel the exquisite fragility of who we are and where we are and what we're consuming and what we need to do to remedy the situation, so that all of us, not only humanity, but the mother trees and all sentient being in the larger ecosystem called planet Earth, within the context of a solar system and a universe that's full of sentient life. That is the ultimate reality within which we find ourselves today. And I just wanted to share as we welcome you to this session of Humanity Rising, where we're going to now transition to a couple of people that I've known for many, many years, who've been on the front lines 24/7, 365 to protect and preserve. That which is most essentially who we are. But before we get to that delightful moment, I want to invite you all to just pause and for the next minute to the sounds of the Ave Maria. Attune yourself with your body, attune yourself with your heart, and just for the next minute, feel the mother trees and send them love, and send them water. Thank you, everyone. Now it's my pleasure to welcome back Daniel Sheehan, who's been on Humanity Rising a number of times. You all know him, one of the great constitutional litigators and human rights activists in the United States over the last 50 years, who's been involved in many of the seminal court cases that have helped shape American justice, American culture, and American perceptions of who we need to be as our democracy evolves. And today, I'm doubly excited and privileged to invite Sarah Nelson, who's been Danny's partner for a very, very long time, and like Danny, has dedicated her life with a deep commitment to social justice and environmental integrity. And the two of them have been literally on the front lines. And the Romero Institute, which has come out of their partnership and their commitment, has been on the front lines of social justice for over 50 years. And so we thought, in the spirit of the sequoias, in the spirit of the mother tree, to dedicate this session to just hear from Sarah and Danny, their story, the challenges that they've taken up, the challenges that are confronting them in the Romero Institute today, and as a way to remind us where we are, and also to deeply challenge us of what we now must do, not only to preserve democracy, but to continue the march of justice into the future. So Danny and Sarah, I welcome you to Humanity Rising. Please turn on your videos and take yourself off mute, and welcome. I turn the program over to you. Sarah, it is so good to see you.
Hello. Your opening was very moving. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so why don't we do this? Why don't we cover, at least briefly, to begin with, some of the projects that we're engaged in right now, to set it in the immediate context of the forest fires and threats to the environment, not only here in California, but throughout our world, and what we're doing to address this, both with regard to our Let's Green California project and our Lakota People's Law project. And then we'll move to a presentation of the history of how we have gotten here. And then we will go into more detail about the particular projects. So why don't we begin, Sarah, with you explaining to everyone what the Romero Institute is right now, having become the prodigy of the Christic Institute. Let people know who Archbishop Romero is, because many people may not recognize who he is, and let them know what we're doing, at least briefly here at the beginning, to which we'll return in more detail later after I help give sort of a historical background. Okay?
Yes. First of all, I'd like to thank Jimmy for inviting us to come on and talk about our work. We, feel very deeply. We know, we don't think, we know that we are in an existential moment, more than one, actually, on planet Earth, and that what we do now together is going to determine whether there is a future for our children and our grandchildren. And so Danny and I are committed to the end. We will continue this work until we can't do it anymore, because we feel a profound responsibility, which I hope is shared by all of you, that this is on our watch. What is happening now is on our watch. We are the ones here on the planet that can either make a positive future or not. It is completely up to us. So, and I want to say that there are days when it's difficult, because it seems as though the decisions being made by leaders, some of whom we elected, are exactly the wrong ones. Given the challenges we're facing, that instead of going to a green economy and a green future and a positive future, the steps that are happening are going in the opposite direction. So I just want to say at the outset that we are motivated, we stand on our faith values, on the inspiration that comes from source. And, we know that on the other side of the veil, there's an entire community of people who support what we are trying to do, all of us. And so that helps a lot to always know, no matter what human beings do right now, there is an entire community in the spirit that is rooting for all of us to find our way through this mess and create a positive future, because we have no right to destroy this amazingly beautiful, exquisite, breathtaking planet. And I'm not, I'm sure there will be other planets, and the new cameras that are out there and all that, we'll find them. But right now, there isn't another blue and green planet with an atmosphere and life birthing every single second. There isn't one we've found so far. This one is our responsibility. This is the one that we are caretakers of, which the indigenous people have always known, that they're here to be stewards of the planet and to work with the planet and to be in alignment with it, that this is where we come from and this is where we go to when our time is time to make the transition. And we didn't create this planet or any other one, and we have absolutely no right to destroy it. It's a catastrophe what we're doing, a catastrophe. So I'm inviting all of you to devote your lives to contributing to the solutions to this, because that's the only way we're going to make it. And all right, so Danny wants me to talk a little bit about what we're doing now. First of all, I'll say, yes, it's true. Jimmy's right. We've been doing this work for about 50 years. And we're a certain kind of, we have a certain attitude, a certain mission, a certain way of approaching things We're an interfaith law and policy organization that uses the tools of litigation, investigation, or grassroots organizing, public education, and research to address systemic injustice and to find permanent, impactful solutions to that injustice, so that it doesn't just, so that we can actually shift something and make something change for thousands and sometimes millions of people. So that's the mission. And right now, I would say that the climate crisis, the crisis of climate change, is the greatest injustice that has ever been perpetrated on the human family. It is so massive. It is so all-inclusive. It's so mysterious that the people who are driving this catastrophe and making it worse don't seem to understand or care about the fact that it's going to affect their children and grandchildren as well as themselves. I don't know, they just seem to be clueless about what they're doing. Maybe not. I mean, one of the questions I have is, what in the world is going on in their heads? There's an article in the magazine of the New York Times this last weekend about a man named Suki, who decided he wanted to make a lot of money in natural gas because of the moment in history where we find ourselves. Oh boy, he could become really rich. And at the end of the article, when he was asked about whether or not he was concerned about what the natural gas was going to be doing to climate change in the future, he said, "I'll be dead, so it won't matter." So that's a different consciousness. That's a consciousness that doesn't care about anything but himself, maybe his family, that has no sense of communal consciousness, communitarian consciousness, which is what we have to have now. We can't find our way through this without communitarian consciousness, which means that we embrace the human family as our own family, and we find a way together to solve these problems. So that's what we try to do. We did at Christic Institute, and now at the Romero Institute, which is really the same mission, has flown through both of these nonprofits. And the focus of Romero has been in recent years, really, we have 4 major projects going right now, which is unusual for us. In the past, we used to do one big thing like Iran Contra or the Karen Silkwood case against the nuclear industry or something, one major task that we would get up every day and do. But now we're doing 4 because the situation is so serious. And one of them is a project we've been working on for 15 or 16 years, which is called Lakota People's Law Project, with the indigenous people in the Dakotas, the Lakota people. And that started out, because the grandmothers were asking us to come and help them figure out why the Department of Social Services would never allow them to take care of their grandchildren. If their grandchildren needed a place, like a foster care place to be, the Department of Social Services would never give them to the grandmothers and the relatives, the aunties, et cetera. And that began what has become the Lakota People's Project. And after a very serious investigation run by Danny, and a lot of grassroots organizing around the state, and the work of some great interns who came to help us, we discovered really that it was lucrative for the state to keep taking 740 some children every year from the Lakota families, because it brought in so much money to their state from the feds, from the Department of Social Services in Washington, D.C. Because the Health and Human Services Department, they send money for every child. And if you say that it's a special needs child, which they did with every single child that was Lakota, they said they were special needs right away. And if you put them in medical institutions where you can give them drugs, you can get up to $76,000 per child per year, which is, it turned out in one of the years that we finally got the data on, that meant it was about 110 million a year going into foster care, and about 65% of that was Lakota children. And so we realized it was for a state that has less than 800,000 people in it, that was a major contribution to their state budget. So fortunately, NPR at Danny's invitation eventually came into the state and did their own investigation and concluded the same conclusions, and did a 3-part series that sort of blew the lid off of this issue nationally, and everybody became aware of this problem. And we worked with Lakota leaders and had our own staff. Lakota staff still do. Our own office out there opened up in 2006. And we took delegations to Washington, D.C. From all the tribes, and communications from all the tribes, because there are 9 tribes in the Dakotas. And they became aware in D.C. that this was a real problem. And the Justice Department wanted to do new sort of regulations for enforcing ICWA, the Indian Child Welfare Act, which would protect Indian children and allow them to insist that they be raised first by relatives or by other tribal people before they're given to white people. And that really, and Danny was asked to write the guidelines that we would propose, and most of those were accepted by the Justice Department and put into practice. We're now looking at a situation with the Supreme Court where the adoption attorneys and all the people who make a lot of money moving Lakota children in the adoption services are trying to overturn the ICWA law in the same way that Roe was overturned. It's before the Supreme Court right now. They'll make a decision in the fall about whether to overturn and get rid of the Indian Child Welfare Act, which would be the beginning of the end for tribes as we know them in the United States, because there is no future without children. There's no future. So it's a major thing that's going on right now. And we're, of course, involved in, we're doing an amicus brief for that. Our legal team has been focusing on this for a while now, and there are others. There will be a lot of amicus briefs in this, and and NARF, the Native American Rights group, is coordinating that, and it's going to be a historical moment when they make this decision. And if we look at who they are and what they're doing and what they seem to be intending, the rolling back of a lot of rights systematically, it doesn't look good. So what we're now doing on that front, besides fighting the pipelines, which we've done with the Lakota leadership there in our teams, they have fought the pipelines. Is in addition to that, in addition to promoting voting rights throughout the tribes this year, we're also and working on ICWA. I just want to say that over a period of 15 or 16 years, and this is a very good thing, the Lakota People's Law Project has become one of the known voices for Indigenous people in the United States. And the teams and the people that have worked on this with us all this time have succeeded in breaking through the silence and becoming a voice, regular voice for the Indigenous perspective that is one that knows that we have to be in alignment with Mother Earth. and that our job is to be stewards on the planet, not rape and pillage and destroy this gorgeous planet, but work with Mother Nature. And so I'm very, very happy to say that with all the challenges that we face in this space of the indigenous rights, that Lakota People's Law Project has become a voice that is heard by many people, many people. So the other thing that we're doing, which is really a major focus for us, is we are writing now for the first time. This is new for us because we've done a lot of things, but we haven't really written legislation. We're writing legislation in California to get to carbon zero in our state as fast as possible, hopefully most of it by 2030 or soon thereafter. Now, we believe that California is a place where this could be done, even though it's the third largest oil producer in the United States. It's the fifth largest economy on the planet, but it does have advanced environmental laws in some very important ways. And it has a democratic leadership and assembly and Senate, which is much more open to solutions in the climate space than other parties. And so we're climbing the mountain to figure out how to operate really effectively in the space of state legislation. And I'm happy to say that a little over a year ago, we were looked at by elected leaders that we know and stuff. They would say, well, I don't know, the Romero Institute isn't really known in the California state legislative space. We don't, I don't know about you guys and whether you're going to get anything done. I'm happy to say that as of now, we are pretty much recognized in the space by the major environmental groups we're in alliance with in some very important ways. We are in partnership with the environmental justice movement because we're in partnership with Dolores Huerta and her foundation. We have been for almost a year now. And she is known throughout the state, not only by the environmental justice movement, but by the farm workers and the women and the Democrats and everything. So it's we're blessed with this wonderful partnership with her and her team. And they have the ability, for instance, in certain districts and areas of our state to produce about 600 written letters to elected leaders in 2 weeks. And so they pay a lot of attention to her in Sacramento. And then the third really important thing that we've been doing is working with labor. What we discovered a year and a half ago when we really focused on this is that that the labor movement was not in alliance with the environmental movement on these issues, mainly because the building trades had so many people in them that were working in the oil industry or were pipe fitters for the natural gas pipelines or different trades that would be really, they would lose their jobs if we all went green, they thought. That's how they viewed it. Or they would lose a job that paid them $125,000 a year so they could send their kids to college and all that. And they would take a job that paid them $50,000 a year, and they didn't want that to happen to them. So, and they saw, of course, what happened in Pennsylvania, in the Midwest, when all the jobs went to China, et cetera, and they were just like, oh, okay, we're not going to have this. So I have a heart for labor because I was the labor chair of the National Organization for Women back in the 70s when we did the Karen Silkwood case, who was a labor union woman who was killed by the nuclear industry security firm. And because she was raising questions about the safety of the workers and the public from this nuclear plant where she worked in Oklahoma. And so I had a lot of experience with labor. And also Ben Eichard, who is one of our leaders in our organization, he is a union organizer and has been with a number of unions. And so, he really has a lot of experience. And so we just said, okay, we've got to be working with labor on the language they want in legislation, on how we can thread this needle of making sure that the new green jobs have labor standards and are skilled and trained workers who really are trained by the unions and know what they're doing, which is in all of our interest. Because for one thing, we want the chargers and everything the million and more chargers that have to be built in the state to work. And also, the unions are the key to having a middle class in this country. This gap that is this gaping gap in the economy that has occurred between the bottom and the top since Reagan is very, very destructive. And the part of how they've been able to do that is to weaken the unions in a lot of different ways. And so our position is they need to be stronger, and they need to be at the table with the environmentalists, the environmental justice folks, the interfaith people, and the business people to figure out how we're going to get through this situation. So we have made a lot of progress in that area. And I'm happy to say that the bill that we are putting through this year has gone through the Assembly successfully, is now going through the Senate, and vice versa. It's gone through the Senate and it's now going through the Assembly, and it's looking very good so far, very, very good, going through the different committees. And we have had labor support from the building trades, different groups, and now the whole building trades stand up and support our bill in the course of going through these committees. And so, I can't tell you how good that is. That is very, very good, because it means that we have successfully, they see that we care about them and we understand what the challenge is for them. And we want to sit down and we want to talk about how we can get through this. And that is very important because, the labor unions are very powerful when it comes to electing Democrats. They put people out, they canvass, they go door to door, they deliver on the ground when it's time for elections. And if we're ever going to survive this climate change thing, we've got to be at the table with them. And so I'm really happy to report that we're making progress on that. And so that now we're going to do a series of bills. This is the first one. We started out wanting to do a Green New Deal for the entire state, saying that, we have to have some different ways of doing things here. Public banks, we've got to make some moves here that are going to make it possible for us to solve the climate change crisis fast. And so then we realized, we can't do that. And for a whole number of reasons, you can't just do that in California. And they have a law that says, we have a law here that says that you can't do an omnibus bill, a bill that involves all these different things at once. Okay. So it's been a big learning curve this whole year. But so what we did is we went in really strategically working on two things, really, the main two things. How do we get labor standards into the process of these bills? And how do we get an emphasis on the low and moderate income folks? Because they don't have any chargers in their communities. They barely have access to the incentives where you can buy an electric car, because you almost have to have a PhD to figure out how to get those incentives. And there are 4 different programs and they're really complicated. So for instance, one of the things our bill does is it creates one single portal for all of those incentive programs that's user friendly, and a person can go there and figure out what they qualify for. Do they qualify for 8,000? Do they qualify for 11,000? What is it? And then when they go to the store to buy the dealer to buy the electric car, he just hits the button and the computer tells him how much incentive is available to that person, and they get it immediately, not later on their taxes, which is not that helpful for low and moderate income people. They need it right at point of purchase. So while these, these strategic things can make a big difference, because we cannot get to carbon zero with only the people with Priuses and Teslas. We have to get to carbon zero with everybody, which means everybody needs an electric car. Everybody has to have chargers in their communities. There has to be an entire infrastructure for going electric. And that's the name of our series of bills, Electrify California. If everything were electric tomorrow, instead of natural gas and fossil fuel driven, it would be huge. And in California, 40% of our emissions are associated with transportation. So that's why we zeroed in on that. And we are now looking at the next set of what we like to call silver bullets or strategic moves for the next bill to go in next February. This one went in this February. So, and it'll again be about electrifying California as fast as we possibly can. And producing more of our own clean energy in the state, so that we don't have to buy it on the national market, so that we're producing it here with wind farms and solar farms, et cetera. So that's what we're doing. And our approach to this, we're bringing everything we've ever learned to this work, because everything we've ever learned in litigation, in investigation, in education, in organizing, in policy. And the biggest challenge, Jimmy was saying, well, what are the biggest challenges in this work? It's money, because we could, with a lot more money, we could hire more people to do more of the things that we know need to be done from our previous experience. Most importantly, right now, we need to hire organizers in all the different constituencies. When we did the Karen Silkwood case, we had 7 constituencies working with us. And those were national constituencies. And what we need right now in California are California constituencies that will spring out nationally later as we get this done here. But we need a lot of organizers, because this is an online campaign, but it's our opinion that we soon have to get on the ground in these constituencies and be talking to people and meeting with people and holding town meetings. And we can do some of that online, but it makes a difference. One of the things that Dolores Huerta Foundation's successful tactics is they have these house meetings, and one person has a house meeting and invites 15 people there, and they work on certain issues and learn about them. And then some of those people go and have house meetings, and then some of those people go and have house meetings. And that's how they built a base that can actually impact the elected people. It's a grassroots base that moves and takes action when they're invited to do so. And we have the numbers to deal with climate change. We just don't have, we have the numbers, but they've got the money. The Koch brothers and some of these folks are, it's staggering the amount of money that they have invested in confusing people and telling people that this is all some sort of a left-wing plot. In the meantime, the storms and the hurricanes and the fires and everything are increasing every year, but they keep going. They're continuing to try to pass state legislation and national block any efforts but nationally to solve this because they make so much money in fossil fuels, and they just don't care. I guess they think like this other fellow, when they're dead, what difference does it make? They'll be dead when it gets really bad on the climate, on the earth. So that's one of the things that we're doing, and we are totally committed to that. And then another third thing is the investigation on the RICO case, which is happening in litigation, which I'm going to ask Danny to speak on that. And then we're also working on the sort of public education plans for the history of our work in hopes that it will inspire young people to be motivated and to step out and take action to work together to save their own planet.
Okay, that's terrific. So let me move to that issue first. I'll come back to the RICO, the Racketeer Influence and Corrupt Organization federal criminal complaint that we're putting together against the 6 major oil corporations here in California for their long-time criminal conspiracy to defraud the public by lying about the knowledge that they had that they were destroying the climate. And I'll get back to that as we get more detail about what we're doing right now. But Sarah just raised that one of the other major projects that we're initiating now is to tell people about the history of how we got here so that younger people can be inspired, because there's a great deal of kind of depression going on around now in the face of the Supreme Court decisions, the January 6th attack on the Capitol building, the right-wing element in the Republican Party rising to such an ascendancy that they're dominating one of the 2 major political parties in the country. And there's actual discussion going on right now about the probabilities of Donald Trump being the Republican Party nominee for the presidential race in 2024. So there's a great deal of incipient despair going on now, and people feeling kind of helpless, kind of wringing their hands and pacing back and forth and asking each other whether they have any ideas about how to change this trajectory that's going on right now. So what we have done is we're initiating a campaign inside our Romero Institute to explain to the younger generations, and they're now getting to be more and more younger generations than ours, as it turns out, historically, as we move into the kind of senior class of our species. There are juniors and sophomores in the beginning now, with freshmen in effect coming in to new generations. So that we've initiated this program to try to tell people about our history and how it is that as normal, regular people, we've been able to put together an organization in a history that has been able to substantially impact different public policies. So that this invitation that Jim has extended to us to explain our history and what we're doing, we're very grateful for. So let me do this in a little bit of time that we have. This started back when Jim Garrison and I were both at the Jesuit National Headquarters in their social ministry office in Washington, D.C. Sarah was the labor secretary for the National Organization for Women. And Jim and I at the national headquarters were working on trying to eliminate nuclear weapons on the planet because this was one of the 2 major threats that were facing us of our potential self-destruction with thermonuclear weapons, in addition to the issue of climate change that's just descended upon us now. So we were working away at that. And what happened is that we realized that one of the sources of the nuclear fissionable materials that were being used to generate more and more nuclear weapons on the planet were actually as a result of the 103 private nuclear power plants around the country. That what they were doing is they were generating nuclear waste from the process of generating nuclear power. And one of the tactics that we had undertaken to try to stop the generation of more and more of this nuclear weapons grade material in the waste materials was to stop them from moving those waste materials around the country and trying to bury them, for example, in New Mexico. And so we helped organize a campaign where we had town councils and county boards of supervisors passing resolutions prohibiting them from carrying these materials through their counties, et cetera. And what happened is that the nuclear industry tried to solve this by establishing a process of reprocessing all of these spent nuclear fuels. And they were going to take them all to one spot and grind them all up and then put them in centrifuges and centrifuge out the plutonium, which was much heavier than the other materials in the waste materials. And then they would take these this plutonium and put them in pellets and put them into fuel rods to fuel future building of new nuclear power plants. So there was a location in Cimarron, Oklahoma, where, not coincidentally, the chairman of the Senate Armed Services Committee, Robert S. Kerr, who was the senator from Oklahoma, had built a major reprocessing plant to which they were going to be sending all of these waste materials and transforming them into 98% pure bomb-grade plutonium in these little plutonium pellets. And what happened is that one of the women there, a labor organizer there at the plant, Karen Silkwood, a young 30-year-old young woman who was terribly upset about the health risks that the people were being exposed to there at the plant, because the plant was concealing from these young workers the fact that this radioactive material that they were working with was going to be causing cancer to them if other safety standards weren't abided by. And so this young woman actually was organizing a union, a chapter of the OCAW, the Oil, Chemical, and Atomic Workers. She was organizing a union for them, and she was going around on her lunch hour and on the coffee breaks, organizing people and handing out leaflets and pamphlets and trying to get them to all vote to put a union in. And so what the company did is they put her on the night shift, the graveyard shift from 8 p.m. until 8 a.m. In the morning when there was no one else in the plant. They just put her there where she couldn't get at any of the other people. And what she did is took advantage of this opportunity to start going through offices in the plant and finding files. And she ended up discovering a file called the MUF file, the missing and unaccounted for plutonium, that actually showed that they were missing 40 pounds of 98% pure bomb-grade plutonium. It was enough to make 4 major nuclear bombs, twice the size of those at Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And she didn't realize that what that implied. She thought that that meant that they were terribly sloppy and that they were missing this plutonium inside the pipelines at the plant, and it was threatening to contaminate the people. So she called the Oil, Chemical, and Atomic Workers Union in Washington and reported this missing plutonium to them. And they decided they were going to send a New York Times reporter out to talk with her and to get copies of these documents that she had Xeroxed. And as soon as they set up that agreement to have him come see her, all of a sudden she was mysteriously contaminated with radioactive plutonium, which turns out to have been placed inside her home. On the food in the refrigerator of her home, and she was radically contaminated. And so they seized her and took her into custody when she showed up at the plant already radiated, and they took her to Los Alamos and kept her there so that she couldn't meet with this New York Times reporter that was flying out to Oklahoma. Well, it turns out she escaped from Los Alamos and snuck back home. And she was on her way to meet with David Burnham, an investigative reporter for the New York Times, to bring these documents to him. And she was murdered on the way. Her car was rammed and run off the road into a concrete culvert, and she was killed. And they entered her vehicle and took all the documents out of it, took them away from her, all of which we proved. And the bottom line is that Sarah was approached. It went out as a huge bulletin around the country that this young woman had been killed on the way to meet with the New York Times reporter. And so Sarah and Kitty Tucker, one of the other women in the National Organization for Women, got together and said, this is intolerable. Here, we've been mounting this major campaign at the National Organization for Women to get young women to participate more aggressively and actively in labor unions around the country. And Sarah, as the labor secretary of the National Organization for Women, had been heading up this campaign. And here this young woman is murdered, and nobody's doing anything about it. And so Sarah and Kitty and others inside the National Organization for Women, Karen DeCrow and Eleanor Smeal, mounted this major campaign to undertake an investigation of what it is that happened to her and where her documents went and why they killed her. And as it turns out, the National Organization for Women reached out to us at the Jesuit National Headquarters because we had been becoming very aggressive in our public policy division, where Jim and I both were, on a lot more issues than just nuclear weapons. And so that we'd been involved in a number of cases, one of which was protesting the Vietnam War. And we represented Father Dan Berrigan and Phil Berrigan and Liz McAllister and Ben Spock, the baby doctor, and Ralph Abernathy from the NAACP. We were representing them. And one of the defendants in the case that we were working on to defend them was so impressed by the trial that we did that got them all acquitted for a big demonstration we did at the White House. They said, "Oh, wait a second. If this was just like in the movies, this trial that we just had, this was fantastic. Would you be interested in possibly helping the family of Karen Silkwood to actually represent her estate, to try to get to the bottom of what's happened to her and what's going on out at that plant?" And so I was invited to come to a meeting where Sarah Nelson, and we were both like 30 years old at that time, same age as Karen Silkwood. We were terribly upset over the fact that one of our tribe had been killed like this, and nobody was doing anything about it. So Sarah brought together a big group of people at the Institute for Policy Studies in Washington, D.C., the big room full of people in this big auditorium. And she came in to talk all of us into joining to help her and Kitty and the National Organization for Women to get to the bottom of this. And we joined with them and formed an extraordinarily interesting alliance between the National Organization for Women and the Jesuit Order of the Catholic Church. A rather surprising marriage of these two different groups, as it were. And so we joined together and we brought together these 7 different constituencies that Sarah has talked about: the labor union people, the National Organization for Women in the feminist movement, the religious public interest groups, the social ministry people, the American Civil Liberties Union, that was upset about the fact that Karen Silkwood, prior to them killing her, had been wiretapping her home and conducting illegal surveillance against her and the other union people. So we put together this constituency and we mounted this major campaign, and we discovered who had actually killed her. We found direct eyewitnesses that had witnessed them taking the documents out of her car. And we won a $10.5 million judgment against the Kerr-McGee Nuclear Corporation, the largest single civil judgment in the history of the United States at that time. And everybody was very excited in the public justice realm about what we had achieved. And they contacted us immediately and asked us to go to 3 Mile Island because the nuclear plant there had just melted down. And so that we were actually picked up by plane out of Oklahoma City while everybody was still celebrating the $10.5 million judgment. And they flew us to 3 Mile Island. And we succeeded in mounting a litigation to stop them from pumping the radioactive effluents out of the damaged core at 3 Mile Island into the Susquehanna River, which is what the Nuclear Regulatory Commission had already authorized them to do by licensing them to do it. And we intervened and stopped them from doing that. And so those back-to-back decisions in the Karen Silkwood case, and then in the 3 Mile Island case, what they did is they stopped the construction of all private nuclear power plants in the United States from that time. And so that our organization of people that had come together to do the Silkwood case, everybody recognized us as a group of baby boomers, all of us who were 30 years old, basically at that time, had all done this. And Jim Garrison came out and we all organized and we're doing this. We actually, while we were preparing the case, we stopped the building of one of the largest nuclear power plants in the country at Black Fox up there. While we were doing the Karen Silkwood investigation and case, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission had the audacity to try to build a nuclear power plant right under our nose, right there. And so what we did is organize huge demonstrations and entered into the facility, put big ramps up over the fences and climbed in, and everybody chained themselves to the bulldozers and stopped the construction of that plant. So people were happy with what we had accomplished in these two cases. And so they started communicating to us saying, look, please don't just disband now that you've done this. You've stopped the construction of private nuclear power plants in the country. That you've stopped them from pumping the radioactive effluents into the river, in the Susquehanna River. Will you people please stay together and try to do other things? And so we gathered together, the group of us that had been involved in the case, and Jim Garrison was there, and Sarah and I, and Father Bill Davis, and other folks. And we ended up deciding that we were going to form a 501c3 public interest group that was going to have investigation, litigation, research, grassroots organizing, public education, a new kind of creation that was kind of unique in the area of public justice, that it wasn't just a litigation group like, ACLU, and it wasn't just an investigative group, and so what we did is we created, we came up with the idea of establishing this 501c3, and Jim Garrison, we were at a Rupe House working away at this, which was an old abandoned convent in Washington, D.C., on the grounds of the Franciscan monastery, right next to the National Catholic Cathedral. And we were having these weekend-long meeting trying to figure out how we would do this. And so Jim ended up coming downstairs from upstairs and saying, look, I've been reading Teilhard de Chardin, who was the Jesuit priest and a paleontologist who discovered Peking man. And he has come up with this term that he uses for the unified phenomenon that bonds the entire universe together into one single unified harmonic whole. And he refers to it as the Christic force. And that would be a good name for us. And so we all went, yay, Christic Institute. Yeah, let's have the. So we established the Christic Institute in 1980 at the end of the Karen Silkwood case. And we began to do other cases. We were contacted immediately and going down into North Carolina because the Ku Klux Klan and the American Nazi Party had gunned down a number of 6 people killed, others wounded when the Ku Klux Klan and the American Nazi Party assaulted a public demonstration that we were trying to organize a union in the Amalgamated Clothing and Textile Union at the textile plant in North Carolina, with Black people and white people being recruited on an equal basis. And so the Klan and Nazis came and attacked them and gunned them down right in front of the police, and the police wouldn't do anything about it. And so that we were asked to come in right away and mount a major federal civil rights lawsuit against the Klan and the Nazis and the Greensboro Police Department. And as it turns out, the Federal Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms Division people who had infiltrated into the Nazi Party and the FBI, that had infiltrated into the Ku Klux Klan. And their two organizers, Bernard Bukovich in the ATF and Eddie Dawson in the FBI were inside informants. They're the ones that instigated the Klan and Nazis to attack the demonstrators. And so we did this major lawsuit against them and won a $500,000 judgment against them. But most importantly, got them found guilty of actually conspiring to attack these people. And then we were contacted immediately and asked to go to Mississippi to defend the first elected Black mayor in the deep delta of Mississippi, who was accused of first-degree murder down there for trying to organize the Black people in an 86% Black county to actually vote. And we went in and actually investigated that case, Sarah and I and our Christic Institute people and our little babies that we had by that time, Sarah and I, this wedding between the National Organization for Women and the Jesuit order resulted in our wedding and our having our children. And we brought them with us down to Mississippi, into the deep delta of Mississippi, 50 miles south of and deeper into the delta than where Swerner and Cheney were found murdered earlier. And it was, and we were surrounded by the Ku Klux Klan down there. In fact, Dagan, our younger of our two sons, took his first steps that night in that house, surrounded by the Ku Klux Klan, driving around and around our house and honking their horns and turning their flashing their lights on and off, and we went forward and won that case, not only saving him from the gas chamber, but proving that he was innocent by finding out who did the murder at issue there and putting them on the stand. And Johnny Walls, one of the local Black lawyers that was working on the case with us, broke him on the stand and got them to confess that they had done this. And so that we began to establish a certain kind of notoriety around the Christic Institute. That Morris Dees reached out to us after we had done the case there in North Carolina. And Lewis Pitts, one of our other lawyers, and I met with him, and he was inspired to establish the Southern Poverty Law Center, which has become a famous civil liberties fighting force down in the South against the Ku Klux Klan and the Nazis and other hardcore right-wing people like the Proud Boys and others. So that this inspiration that was being generated by us demonstrating what could be done by just regular people that were coming together and dedicating ourselves to solving these kind of social justice problems. And so we got contacted right then after we had won that case there. We were contacted by the bishop down in South Texas, Bishop John Fitzpatrick, who had set up a shelter for refugees fleeing from Honduras, from Guatemala and El Salvador, fleeing from the death squads down there against these fascists and authoritarian dictators that were organizing in Central America and attacking peasants. And people started fleeing from there. And Bishop Fitzpatrick had set up a place called the Romero Center, just this side, north side of the Rio Grande River, and we're taking in refugees. And it turns out Sister Diane Mellencamp, one of the Catholic nuns that worked there, and one of her lay volunteers, Stacy Lynn Merck, were arrested, taking two of the refugees up from the border, driving them up to San Antonio to get them to qualify and file for a political refugee status. And they were arrested by the Migra, by the immigration police down there under the Reagan-Bush administration. And they were arrested and charged with illegal assistance to undocumented Central American aliens. So Bishop Fitzpatrick contacted the Jesuit headquarters and said, look, that Christic Institute group that's been doing all of these things, can you possibly get them to come down and defend Sister Diane Mellencamp and Stacy Lynn Merck and a reporter from the Dallas Times Herald, Jack Fisher, who was in the car with them when they were arrested, trying to move these people up to San Antonio. And in the bishop's car, actually, Bishop Fitzpatrick's car. So he had a large interest in making sure that they were acquitted. So we went down in and started working on the first of the American Sanctuary Movement defenses down there, and were able to win that case. We went right straight forward and charged them, the Reagan-Bush administration, with violating the Refugee Act by issuing a secret order to the Immigration and Naturalization Service there in Brownsville, prohibiting them from enforcing the Refugee Act that had been passed by Congress, authorizing people who found themselves here in the United States and were in legitimate fear of returning to their home country for fear that they'd be persecuted because of their religious or political beliefs. And in this case, their political beliefs of opposing those fascist governments. And so we ended up becoming involved in that criminal defense. And during the preparing and prosecution of that criminal defense, which ultimately successfully struck down those arrests as unconstitutional, we encountered a Methodist bishop who told us that he had been approached by one of his congregation and told not to have anything to do with the American Sanctuary Movement because they were smuggling known communist terrorists into the United States, and they were going to be organizing themselves into military cadres in case President Reagan and Vice President Bush found it necessary to send in U.S. military forces into Central America to help prop up one of these right-wing puppet governments that the United States Central Intelligence Agency had been putting in place in El Salvador, in Guatemala, and other places. And they were potentially going to go into Nicaragua to potentially overthrow the new Sandinista government there. And so he comes up out of his congregation and tells the Methodist bishop not to have anything to do with the American Sanctuary Movement because they were organizing these 50,000 undocumented Central American aliens here in the United States into military cadres. And in the event that President Reagan and Vice President Bush had to send in the 82nd Airborne, actually out of Fort Bragg, North Carolina, to invade and occupy one of these Central American countries, that these people that were organized now as military cadres were going to be attacking our military bases and our police stations and poisoning our water systems and attacking our electric generating plants. You know, I mean, it was this completely bizarre theory that this person had. Well, it turns out that member of his congregation, the Methodist bishop, was in fact the SAC, the special agent in charge of the FBI office in Brownsville. So the bishop was taking it seriously. And so Bishop Fitzpatrick set up a meeting for me to have with this Methodist bishop to assure him that this wasn't true. Because Bishop Fitzpatrick had said to him when the bishop reported this to him that, well, he said, look, the legal counsel for the Jesuit headquarters in Washington, D.C. happens to be here in town defending this Catholic nun and social worker now. He said, so that, look, if anything like that was going on, at least the Jesuits would know about it. So why don't we have a meeting to see what, so we had this meeting and he tells me all about this. And so I almost fell out of my chair laughing about how ridiculous this was. But I promised him that I would look into this and figure out where this rumor was coming from. And it turns out that that's how we initiated the investigation there as the Christic Institute that was in the process of defending the first members of the American Sanctuary Movement that were being attacked, that we ended up uncovering the fact that what had happened is I asked a number of our investigators and people, researchers and investigative journalists that were working with us to look into this rumor to find out where it was coming from, this ridiculous rumor about the American Sanctuary Movement smuggling known communist terrorists into the United States. And it turns out one of our investigators, William Johnstone Taylor, ended up finding out from a friend of his who was the head of the Louisiana State National Guard, that he had been instructed to move military equipment into the hands of this right-wing volunteer group of soldiers of fortune types in the middle of a new secret readiness exercise that the Reagan-Bush administration had underway, practicing mounting a military invasion into Nicaragua, or a military occupation into Guatemala or El Salvador to prop up those governments by airlifting the 82nd Airborne out of Fort Bragg, North Carolina, under the cover of night, called Operation Night Train, and that they were going to be invading, and that they were recruiting this private volunteer group to go around the United States and round up these undocumented Central American aliens and put them into 10 military stockades to arrest all these undocumented Central American aliens. We walked right on top of what it turns out, that when they were smuggling these weapons to this right-wing group of volunteers, our investigator, Bill Taylor, said, "What the hell is this? Some kind of 7 days in May scenario going on here?" And the guy said, "Oh, no, they're going to be smuggling those weapons to the Contras down in Central America." And so what we had done is we'd walked right on top of the covert operation of the Reagan-Bush administration to secretly smuggle weapons to the Contra forces that had been the fascist and the people that were in Nicaragua with Anastasio Somoza when he fell from power. And this was an illegal group that was attempting to overthrow the new Sandinista government. And so we ended up walking right on top of that. So as soon as we got done with the case down in Texas, and those people the charges were all dismissed against them, we began this investigation of this group that was secretly smuggling weapons down to the Contras, and discovered that they were on the flights that were coming back from smuggling these weapons down, were importing massive amounts of cocaine into the United States to be sold, and some of those profits were being used to buy more weapons to ship to the Contras. And so we then began the investigation that resulted in us filing a major federal criminal racketeering act organization, federal criminal complaint against the enterprise of Oliver North in the Reagan-Bush administration. And we filed a civil complaint, which allowed us to prosecute them civilly. And we brought them to court and began this massive investigation against them. And this was the beginning of the Iran-Contra scandal that generated the major hearings in the criminal indictment and conviction of the criminal indictment of several of the highest level members of the Reagan-Bush administration, the Attorney General, Ed Meese, the Secretary of Defense, Caspar Weinberger, the head of the Central American Central Intelligence Agency, and others, until George Bush pardoned them all. And when he pardoned them all, the same day that he issued those pardons, on Christmas Day of 1992, he ended up ordering the Internal Revenue Service to revoke the 501c3 tax-exempt charter of the Christic Institute, asserting that because none of these people whom we had accused of all of these crimes in our Federal Criminal Racketeering Act civil lawsuit, none of them had been ultimately convicted for any of those crimes, and therefore we must have been motivated by political motives. And it's illegal for 501c3 organizations to engage in, quote, political activity. And of course, the reason they hadn't been convicted is because he pardoned them. And that's the only reason they weren't convicted. In fact, that he would have been convicted. George Bush would have been ultimately convicted. The prosecutor, the special prosecutor, the Iran-Contra special prosecutor, Lawrence Walsh, that had been appointed to investigate that. It turns out the right-wing Republican appointees to the special panel of the U.S. Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia that appoints special prosecutors, in order to try to stop us from successfully getting these people prosecuted, had handpicked to be the new special prosecutor, Lawrence Walsh, who it turns out was the senior partner of the law firm of Crow Dunlevy, which is the law firm that we absolutely kicked the shit out of in the Karen Silkwood case. They picked the senior partner at the law firm that we had defeated for the largest civil judgment in the history of the United States in order to become the special prosecutor so he could pretend that there wasn't anything to our charges. Well, as it turns out, it completely backfired because he knew we were right. We're the people that buried him and his entire law firm. And so it backfired on them. And so we were the first people to be contacted by Lawrence Waltz to share with him what the information is. And he went on to indict, one major political official after another, and was heading for George Bush Sr. to indict him and his national security advisor, Donald P. Gregg, of choreographing the entire off-the-shelf operation in complete defiance of Congress and impeach him and remove them from office. So, but the Christic Institute got decertified. The Internal Revenue Service, the politically appointed head of the Internal Revenue Service, appointed by George Bush, ordered the revocation of our tax exempt status and audited us, audited our investigators, very similar to the story you hear going on right now about the two major people in the FBI that had investigated Donald Trump, all of a sudden having been subjected to these massive audits by the IRS at the direct order of the president. The same thing happened with us. That President Bush ordered the IRS to undertake a massive audit of us and yanked our 501c3 on the grounds that we were engaged in political activity against them in the Reagan-Bush administration. And so what happened is a group out in California called the Romero Foundation that had been in existence for some 10 years by that time, as we had been since 1980. What they did is they found out that our 501c3 tax exempt charter had been revoked. So what they did is they held an emergency meeting of their board of directors, and they elected me to be their president and general counsel. They elected Sarah to be the vice president and the executive director of their Romero Foundation. And they elected Father Bill Davis, our secretary treasurer of the Christic Institute, to be the new secretary treasurer for the Romero Foundation. And then they all resigned. The entire board resigned and sent us their files and said, okay, now you are the Romero Foundation. And so we filed a quick thing to change the name to the Romero Institute, and we went right back to work. And it was important because Archbishop Oscar Romero, after whom they were named, he had said he had been assassinated in El Salvador at the directions of Roberto Dubuisson, the guy who was the head of the death squads in El Salvador, from which our defendants down in Brownsville, Texas, had been fleeing from El Salvador from the hand of Roberto Dubuisson. Roberto Dubuisson is the one that ordered the assassination of Archbishop Oscar Romero right at Mass as he was elevating the host. They gunned him down right on the altar. And because he'd been speaking out on behalf of the peasants that were being persecuted by the death squads. And what he said, his friends were warning him before he had been killed, said, you have to stop, trying to speak out against this major authoritarian regime here in El Salvador, because if you don't stop, they're going to kill you. And he said, if they kill me, I will rise again in the voice of my people. So that's what the Romero Institute is, that they tried to kill the Christic Institute at the highest levels of the federal national security state. And we have risen again under the name and the banner of Oscar Romero to continue to do our work. And so we have continued to do our work under the banner of the Romero Institute and are doing the things that Sarah has recounted to you. And it now includes our preparing of another major federal criminal racketeering organization criminal complaint that just like we did at the Iran Contra thing against the 6 major oil corporations here in the state of California for their ongoing criminal conspiracy to produce and sell a knowingly dangerous product just like the faulty automobiles with a fatal flaw, or tobacco companies that are knowingly distributing cigarettes that they know are giving you cancer, and mounting a lying campaign around their campaign for the oil corporations, instigated and run through the American Petroleum Institute, whom we've also named as a criminal defendant. And we're putting together a 100-page criminal complaint against these major oil corporations and their private security companies that are suppressing people who are trying to protest what these people are doing, not only here, but in Central America, in Ecuador, and also in Africa, where they've wiped out entire villages. The oil corporation security divisions have wiped out entire villages of people who are attempting to stop them from contaminating, destroying their environment there. They've killed and kidnapped and killed leaders who have been trying to democratically organize against the oil corporations, destroying their environment. And so that we're putting all of this information into the Federal Criminal Racketeering Act lawsuit, the complaint that we put together. We're going to be filing that criminal complaint with the United States Attorney here in California, in the Northern District of California. And we're going to be filing a copy of it with the Attorney General, Rob Bonta, here in California, to demand that they impanel a criminal grand jury to subpoena the officials of the oil corporations, not just to kind of wrap their knuckles like Rohana did. The local congressman here in California called a big meeting of these people in Washington, D.C. and scolded them publicly for what they were doing. They need a lot more than scolding. We need to bring these people to the bar of justice. We need to put people in prison for what they're doing if we're really going to stop these people from consciously and willfully and knowingly destroying our planet for the sake of their short-term financial gain. This is a criminal activity, and that we can't degenerate into hating them, but we have to raise the consciousness of our American people to understand that this is a major federal criminal racketeering enterprise, just like the off-the-shelf enterprise of Oliver North was, and we have to bring these people to the bar of justice and stop what they're doing. We've got to stop and roll back the global climate change right now, because this is threatening the entire planet. It's destroying not only our human family, starting with the poorest of the poor and working its way into the center of people here in North America, but it's destroying species. Tens of thousands of species are being eliminated by the global climate change. And the greatest forests, the greatest sequoias are being threatened now with the fires here in California. So we have to join together, not only in bringing to the attention of the American people the criminal conduct of these oil corporations and their conscious lying campaign, saying that there's no such thing as global climate change. They can't tell whether climate change is real or it's going to take much longer. We'll be able to figure out ways of solving this so they can continue to produce the oil and gas and natural gas. And now they've gotten the Democratic administration. Just this last week, Biden has now authorized the drilling in the northern slope of Alaska, that we've been protecting the slopes against massive contamination for the last 25 years. And now here it is, the Democratic administration is actually arguing that they're going to have to do this. So we have to realize that while the hardcore right wing has taken over the Republican Party, we need to also raise the consciousness of all political people in the country and put forth candidates that are truly progressive, they're truly spiritually driven, and that we have an opportunity through the access to the Democratic Party primaries to actually put forth candidates who have a very legitimate potential of winning and taking the offices of inside the Democratic Party here in California and throughout the country, so that we can stop global climate change, utilizing the goodwill of the vast majority of the people in the country who want global climate change to stop. So that's what we're doing right now. So that's bringing it full circle to telling you about their federal criminal racketeering project that we have going now to join with our Let's Electrify California and our Lakota People's Law Project. And that's some of the history of our Romero Institute and how we got here. And this is what we're doing right now. So And as Sarah has said, that we're in need of support. We all of us, as Jimmy remembers, we all started out, I think, making $5,000 each at the Christic Institute, and all living together collectively at the old convent on the Franciscan grounds at Arupe House. And we're still like that. We're getting very, very low income salaries. We're all joining together. We have 27 of us now on full-time staff at the Romero Institute, and we can use your financial assistance. You would have known this was coming, right? that you can send your contributions to the romeroinstitute.org. You just go onto the internet and look under romeroinstitute.org, and you will see a little link that says you can donate to us there, and we will be eternally grateful if you would help us, because you're looking at three of us right now that were there at the beginning, and we're going to be there till the end. All three of us. Great. So
thank you so much, Danny and Sarah. Sarah, why don't you round us off by just saying a little bit more about the specific needs of the Romero Institute, and so if people want to contribute, what they're going to be specifically contributing to.
Yes. First of all, I want to say that we have regular audits now because we're at a size that you have to do that. So, and we pass them with flying colors. So people can be confident that our financial department is doing a great job with management of this budget, et cetera. So, secondly, the challenges that we face now are we know what to do on several fronts. We need more people to get it all done. And that means we have to hire people that have real experience to be able to do the kind of organizing, research, legal writing, investigation, all these components, and education. So right now, we literally need to hire 10 organizers in the state of California. I mean, we have some, but if the state has 40 million people. This is an organizing challenge, and if we get the right people with the right kind of commitment and experience, it's going to make a huge difference. We also are at a point of needing to hire a very specially advanced policy writer, because we put together this first bill, but the next one has to be a bigger bill. And it's more complicated. And there's a lot of research that goes into doing these things. You have to know all the things that have already been done in California legislatively, so you're not stumbling on top of things. There's a lot to it. And we need a very advanced person in that position. We also need a very advanced fundraiser. We need somebody to help us in development, because to climb this mountain every year, adding more people, and doing the training and everything is going to require a person who can really help us fundraise. And so these are the immediate things in front of us, but every year it's going to be more that we have to do, because we only have about 8 years to get this done. and it's just, we need all the help that people are willing to give us.
Yes, thank you. That's the Romero Institute, everyone. 50 years on the front lines of social justice. And as you can see from Sarah and Danny, the purity of heart and the deep commitment, as Sarah said at the beginning and Danny reiterated at the end, to go until you can't go anymore. Whatever's going to come our way. We have people in the Romero Institute that have made an existential commitment to do everything that they can until they can't do it anymore. And that's what it's going to take, given the fragility of our planet at this moment. So I'll bring this now to a close. You're all welcome to join our after chat session. You'll see the link in our chat box. Please go to the romeroinstitute.org and sign up for the newsletter, make a contribution so that they can continue to work. I want to thank you both. I love you dearly as much today as the day we met. They've been 50 years on the front lines, and we've been almost 50 years as good friends. Old friends, as everybody knows, are like fine wine. It doesn't happen easily, and there are many bumps and turns in the roads. But love endures. And I think love is what shapes all of our foibles and frailties through a deeper commitment that abides, and that's what the fraternity of the activists is, as we all in our own way do what we need to do. So thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Danny. And as I began, I would like to just close in the spirit of the sequoias. As we sit here today, they're burning. Mm-hmm. And that is the metaphor for the challenge and the hope. Thank you, everyone. We'll see you tomorrow. Danny's going to be back, and Danny's going to talk to us tomorrow about the Disclosure Project, which is the latest on the UFOs and all matters extraterrestrial. Bye for now. Thanks so much.
Thank you.